At Morixa Tales, we believe in the power of storytelling. Our scripts weave together deep emotions and dramatic turns to deliver justice where it is most needed. Experience captivating mysteries where the truth eventually shines through, leaving a lasting impact on your heart and mind.
On that Sunday, my husband told me the whole family would be having dinner together. Then he added a sentence that left me frozen. "It's better if you don't sit at the table. My mother doesn't want you to." A few minutes later, my mother-in-law texted bluntly, "Don't come. The list is finalized." That night, I packed my things and left in silence. 1 week later, my husband called me back. His voice was panicked. "Thanks for being here. Before we begin, remember to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from in the comments below. This story is presented as a dramatized narrative created for learning and reflection. Some elements are fictional, and any resemblance to real individuals or situations is purely coincidental, while the lesson remains true." The morning of January 15th, 2025 started like any other Wednesday in Seattle. I remember because I'd checked my calendar twice before leaving the apartment, a habit I picked up years ago when deadlines started piling up like dirty laundry. Patterns matter when you're trying to control your life, or at least that's what I told myself back then before I realized how little control I actually had. My name is Sophia. I'm 38 senior UX designer at Amazon's Seattle office in South Lake Union. The title sounds fancier than it feels most days. What it actually means is that I spend my mornings in back-to-back Zoom calls, my afternoons drowning in design reviews, and my evenings still thinking about problems I left unsolved at the office. I've gotten good at compartmentalizing. Work brain, home brain, the version of me that shows up in meetings versus the version that exists in private. Everyone does this, I think. Everyone splits themselves into manageable pieces. The apartment we lived in was in Capitol Hill, a neighborhood that had somehow transformed from quirky to expensive while I wasn't paying attention. Trevor, my husband of 4 years, used to joke that we'd moved there by accident, just following where the rent seemed manageable. By the time we realized we were sitting on real estate gold, we'd already fallen in love with the vintage molding and the coffee shops on every corner. He was the one who noticed those details. He was good at noticing things, at least when it suited him. He was also good at not noticing things. Looking back, that particular skill would prove far more useful to him than the other. That morning, I dressed in the same uniform I wore most days. Black pants, a cream-colored blouse, the kind of outfit designed to disappear into the background, while I talked about user interface improvements and accessibility standards. I spent 45 minutes getting ready, which was probably 30 minutes longer than necessary, but there was comfort in the routine. Shower, moisturizer, coffee from the machine we'd bought at Costco. The small rituals that convince you that you're in control of something, even if it's just the order in which you put on your clothes. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked fine. Tired maybe, but fine. There were small lines around my eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago, or maybe they had, and I was just noticing them now. I'd learned that women start examining their faces differently at a certain age. We look for changes. We catalog decay. We wonder if other people notice what we're starting to see. The drive to South Lake Union takes me past the Space Needle, past the water, through neighborhoods that remind me why I'd chosen this city in the first place. Seattle in January isn't pretty. It's all gray sky and wet pavement, but there's something honest about it. No pretending to be something it's not. Just rain and coffee and people trying to make it work. The city felt like a person I understood. Melancholy but functional, trying its best. My office sits in a glass building that looks like 1,000 other tech company offices. Modern, efficient. The kind of place where they spent money on standing desks and wellness programs while keeping the temperature cold enough to require a sweater in July. When I arrived that morning, I grabbed my badge from my bag and swiped through the entrance. The motion was so automatic I barely registered it. 5th floor. My desk overlooked the city, which sounds impressive until you realize everyone's desk looks the same. We were all staring out at the same gray skyline, all waiting for the same meetings to end, all pretending that proximity to windows meant something about the quality of our work. The day moved the way days usually do when you're not paying attention. A meeting with my team about design iterations on a feature that would probably be scrapped in 3 months anyway. Emails from clients with impossible timelines and unclear requirements. a coffee run to the place on the ground floor where they remember I take oat milk. Small kindnesses that make corporate life feel less impersonal. Around 2 o'clock, I had a conference call with someone from New York who kept muting and unmuting themselves by accident. I'd seen his fumble with the controls at least 4 times before I finally started pretending not to notice. That's a skill I was developing, the ability to not see things, to look past small failures and awkwardnesses, to let people have their dignity even when they were embarrassing themselves. Nothing remarkable happened. That's what I'd tell myself later, trying to understand how an ordinary Tuesday could become the day everything shifted. The answer I'd eventually realize was that nothing remarkable needed to happen. Sometimes the remarkable things are the ones you don't see coming. Sometimes they're already there waiting for you to finally look at them. By 5 o'clock, I was already thinking about home. Not in a romantic way, that feeling had faded somewhere in year 2 of marriage, replaced by something more practical. Just in the way of someone who wanted to change out of business, casual order, something for dinner, maybe watch an episode of something mindless before bed. I had a routine. Home was part of that routine. Trevor had been unemployed for about 8 months by then. He'd been let go from his sales job at a tech firm, something about restructuring something about his numbers not meeting targets. The whole situation had settled into a kind of quiet routine between us. He wasn't stressed about it anymore, or at least he didn't talk about it anymore, and I'd learned not to bring it up. We'd developed a careful choreography around the subject. I didn't ask. He didn't explain. It was easier that way, or so I thought. The drive home took me through neighborhoods I'd memorized without trying. Left on Pine, right on 15th. The rain had started that afternoon, the kind of Seattle rain that feels less like weather and more like a permanent condition. It fell on the windshield with a soft persistence. I had the radio on some NPR program I wasn't really listening to. I was thinking about dinner, Thai food maybe, or we could order from that Italian place we liked. When I pulled into the parking garage underneath our building, I felt something release inside my chest. The feeling you get when you're home, safe, known, like you could finally stop performing and just be yourself. I've learned since then that this feeling is often a trap. Safety is an illusion we construct to make the present moment bearable. I took the elevator up to our floor and unlocked the apartment door with the key I'd had for 4 years. The space was quiet in the way apartments get when you live with someone but aren't quite living together in that moment. Not empty, just waiting. Charged with something I couldn't name. That's when I saw him. Trevor was sitting on our sofa in the living room facing the window that overlooked the street. He hadn't turned on any lights except the one that filtered in from outside. His profile looked different somehow, his jaw set in a way I didn't recognize. He was wearing the shirt I'd bought him for his birthday last year, the blue one that brought out his eyes. He wasn't wearing it well. He looked like someone wearing a costume of himself. Something about the scene felt staged. The way he was positioned, the careful stillness of his shoulders, like he'd been rehearsing this moment, like he'd been waiting for me to come home specifically so I could see him exactly like this. I set my bag down by the door. I took off my shoes. I moved through the motions of arriving home like I always did, waiting for him to turn around and acknowledge me. He didn't. He just sat there staring out at the Capitol Hill street below. "Hey," I said. My voice sounded strange in the quiet apartment. "You're home early." He still didn't move, didn't acknowledge me, didn't turn around. That's when I felt it. That peculiar sensation you get when you suddenly understand that something has shifted, even though you can't yet identify what that something is. It's like when you wake up in the middle of the night convinced something is wrong before you remember why. That feeling, that knowledge that arrives in your body before it reaches your mind. I could sense it from across the room, emanating from him like cold air from an open window. Something had changed. Something fundamental. The careful balance of our marriage, whatever it had been, had tipped in a direction I didn't understand. "Trevor," I tried again. "Are you okay?" He finally turned to look at me. His eyes were different too, harder, colder, like someone had turned down the warmth behind them. He looked at me for a long moment without speaking, and I felt my stomach drop. I didn't know it yet, but in the next few minutes, my life would fracture in a way that wouldn't fully repair itself. I didn't know that the ordinary Tuesday I'd been grateful for just hours ago would become the moment everything changed. I didn't know that the careful compartments I'd built work brain, home brain. The version of me I showed to the world versus the version I kept private would all collapse into each other. All I knew was that I could feel it, even before he spoke, even before I understood the words he was about to say. Even before I realized that the safety I'd felt walking through that apartment door had been an illusion all along. Something was terribly wrong, and I had absolutely no idea how deep it went. He still hadn't moved. That was the first thing I noticed when I stepped fully into the living room. Trevor remained exactly where he'd been when I'd arrived, spine straight against the sofa, hands resting on his thighs like he was posing for a photograph. The city lights behind him cast his face in shadow, which meant I couldn't read his expression, but I didn't need to. Something in the rigidity of his shoulders told me everything I needed to know. He was bracing for something. Trevor. I said it as a question the way you do when you're testing to see if someone is actually there or just a statue that happens to look like your husband. He turned toward me slowly, too slowly. The kind of movement that suggested he'd been waiting for this exact moment, rehearsing it in his head while I was stuck in Seattle traffic. Thinking about quarterly reviews and whether I'd remembered to pay the electric bill. He'd been preparing. That realization hit me before anything else. "We need to talk," he said. "Nobody ever needs to talk about something good. I've learned that much in my 38 years. When someone says those words, it's never followed by good news. It's not, 'We need to talk about that amazing trip,' or 'I've been thinking about our future.' It's always something that makes your stomach drop into a place it shouldn't go." I sat down on the chair across from him, keeping the coffee table between us like it was some kind of barrier. "Okay," I said carefully. "What's going on?" Trevor cleared his throat. Then he said it. "Sunday, next week, my mom's having the family over. A churrasco at her place. She asked me to tell you..." He paused, and in that pause, I could feel him gathering courage. "She asked me to tell you that you won't be sitting at the table." I laughed, actually laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from confusion rather than humor. "I'm sorry, what?" "You won't be at the table. Mom's been very clear about this." He said it the way you'd discuss a weather forecast. "Rain on Sunday. Bring an umbrella. Your wife can't sit at the family dinner. It's all logistics, nothing personal." "Trevor, I don't understand what you're saying right now." I stood up, which was a mistake, because now I was hovering above him, and there was something about the position that felt confrontational. I sat back down. "Are you saying your mother doesn't want me there?" "No, she doesn't mind you being there. She just doesn't want you at the table." He was still using that calm voice, the one that made me feel like I was the one being unreasonable for asking for clarification. "Sunday is supposed to be special. For her. She doesn't want any complications." The word hung in the air between us, complications. That's what I was, apparently, a complication. "I'm your wife," I said. It came out quieter than I intended. "I've been your wife for 4 years. We bought a house together. We have joint bank accounts. I know your family. I know your mother's favorite wine. I've spent countless Sunday afternoons at her house helping her with dinner, and now I'm a complication." Trevor rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture of weariness I recognized. It was the same gesture he'd made when his company let him go, when he'd realized he'd have to update his LinkedIn profile. It was his gesture of defeat. "Please don't make this difficult," he said. "Don't make what difficult? Your mother excluding me from a family meal? She's not excluding you, she's just asking you to sit somewhere else." The phrase landed between us like a stone dropped into still water. Somewhere else. Not at the family table, not among the people I'd married into. Somewhere else. The implication was clear. I didn't belong there. I didn't belong at his family's table. After 4 years of marriage, I was still an outsider. I felt something inside my chest shift. Not break, not yet. But shift. Like a bone moving in its socket, the initial strain before the actual fracture. I'd read once that sometimes your body knows something before your mind catches up. I was experiencing that in real time. My nervous system was understanding what my brain was still struggling to process. "You told her no," I said. It wasn't a question. Or maybe it was, but phrased as a statement because I couldn't bear to hear the answer if I asked it directly. Trevor didn't respond immediately. That silence told me everything. You told her no, right? I tried again, and this time it definitely came out as a question. You told her that your wife sits at the table. Sophia. He used my name in a way that felt like an apology without actually apologizing. It was a tone meant to soften me, to make me feel unreasonable for expecting basic respect. My mom is very set in her ways. She's particular about these things. So you're going to let me show up and then what, sit in the kitchen, like a servant, stand by the grill? What exactly is the picture your mother has in her mind here? I don't know, he said, and that was maybe the most honest thing he'd said all evening. She didn't specify, I just know she doesn't want you at the table. I looked at my husband, this man I'd married. This man I'd trusted with my last name and my future and my financial security, and I tried to see in his face some indication that he was going to stand up for me, that he was going to tell me this was ridiculous, that he was going to make this right. Instead, he looked tired. He looked like someone who'd already had this conversation with his mother and lost. He looked like a man who'd made his choice, and I wasn't it. I need to know, I said slowly, whether you agree with this or if you're just delivering a message. Trevor met my eyes for the first time since he'd started talking. I'm just telling you what she said. That wasn't an answer. It was the absence of one. And that absence said more than any words could have. I felt something inside me fracture then, not dramatically, not like breaking glass. It was quieter than that. More like watching a photograph fade in the sun, not a sudden destruction, but a slow bleaching away of something that used to have color. This was the moment when I first understood that my marriage might not be what I thought it was, that the man sitting across from me might not be who I'd believed him to be. I stood up and walked into the kitchen without saying anything else. I needed distance. I needed the island counter between us. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't in the same room as a man who would sit and listen to his mother exclude his wife, and then deliver that message with the tone he'd used to discuss weather or traffic. I placed my hands flat on the cool marble of the counter and tried to breathe. My heart was racing. My mind was spinning. But beneath all of that was something colder, something more dangerous. The first hint of doubt. The first crack in the foundation of my marriage. This was the moment I would realize later when everything started to unravel. Not obviously, not in a way that would make the ending inevitable. But this was the moment when something fundamental shifted. This was when I first learned that the man I'd married would choose his mother's comfort over my dignity, that he would ask me to accept less than I deserved and deliver that message without ever standing up for me. I didn't know then where this crack would lead. I didn't know how deep it would go. I only knew that something had broken and I had no idea how to put it back together. I'd made it my ritual every Sunday evening right after dinner, right before I settled in to watch something mindless on Netflix, check the joint bank account, review the week's transactions, make sure nothing was out of the ordinary. It was the kind of habit that formed slowly over time, born from the practical necessity of keeping our finances in order. 2 incomes meant 2 perspectives. 1 shared account meant one of us had to keep track. That Sunday, a week after Trevor's announcement about the table, I was sitting at our kitchen island with my phone in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. The city lights were just starting to come on outside our Capitol Hill windows. The apartment felt quiet in that particular way it did when Trevor had gone out somewhere, he wouldn't say where. Just, I'm heading out. And then the door closing behind him before I could ask follow-up questions. I'd started doing that by then, asking fewer follow-up questions. It was easier. I opened the banking app and scrolled through the week's transactions out of habit. Gas, groceries, the streaming services we both forgot we were paying for. Everything normal, everything expected. And then I saw it. A CH transfer. $30,000 to someone named Fiona Brooks. The number just sat there on the screen, refusing to make sense. $30,000. Not a typo. Not something I'd misread. $30,000 to someone I'd never heard of, transferred just 2 days after Trevor had told me I couldn't sit at his family's dinner table. My hand started to shake. I read the transaction 3 times as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something less alarming. They didn't. Fiona Brooks, $30,000, January 17th. The date was 2 days after our fight, 2 days after his mother had made her demands clear. I set the phone down on the counter and pressed my hands flat against the cold marble, trying to steady myself. My mind was reaching for explanations. Fiona Brooks. Who was Fiona Brooks? A colleague, a friend. Something about the name made my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't quite explain. I picked the phone back up and called Trevor. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I hung up without leaving a message. I didn't even know what I would have said. Why did you transfer $30,000 to someone named Fiona Brooks? Seemed like the kind of question that deserved more than a voicemail. I tried again. 5 minutes later, same result, voicemail. The blue light of my phone cast shadows across my face in the darkening kitchen. By the 8th call, I'd stopped being confused. I was moving into something else, something sharper. When he finally answered, I could hear traffic in the background. Sophia, what's wrong? Why are you calling so much? His voice had that careful quality to it, the tone people use when they're trying to figure out how much you know before they answer your questions. Who is Fiona Brooks? I asked. I didn't bother with hello. I didn't bother with small talk. There was a pause. Not long enough to be completely suspicious, but long enough to let me know he was calculating something. What do you mean? Trevor. $30,000. Transferred to Fiona Brooks 2 days ago. I need to know who that is. Another pause. Longer this time. I can explain, he said finally. The 4 words that are basically designed to make everything worse. She's helping my mom with something, a business thing. A business thing, I repeated. A $30,000 business thing. My mom's company is having some problems. Fiona is a business consultant. She's helping her figure some things out. I pressed my phone closer to my ear as if that would somehow let me hear what he wasn't saying. And why does the consultant need $30,000 from our account? It's a short-term thing. She needs capital to work with. I'm going to pay it back in 2 weeks, maybe 3. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal, that's what he said. $30,000 transferred to a woman I'd never heard of was not a big deal. Trevor, that's our money, our savings. We discussed never making large transfers without talking to each other first. I know, and I'm sorry I should have mentioned it, but my mom was stressed, and Fiona said she could help, and everything moved really quickly. I promise I'll replace it. Every word he said landed wrong. Not because they didn't make sense, but because they made too much sense in the way that lies often do. They had the shape of truth. They just didn't feel true. I'm going to need more information, I said. Who is Fiona Brooks? Where does she work? How does your mother know her? Look, I'm driving right now. Can we talk about this when I get home? It was the oldest trick in the book. Delay, deflect. Promise to discuss it later when you've had time to refine your story. Just answer the question. Who is she? He sighed. It was the sigh of someone who wanted this conversation to be over. She's just someone my mom hired. I don't know her that well. She seems professional. That's all I know. Professional. The word lingered with me. A professional consultant. A professional woman who'd somehow convinced my husband to transfer $30,000 from our joint account without consulting me first. I hung up without saying goodbye. My hands were still shaking when I set the phone on the counter. I stared at the transaction on my screen. Fiona Brooks. The name felt foreign in my mouth, like a word in a language I'd never learned. Something inside me had shifted when I saw that amount. Not dramatically, but I could feel it. The first real concrete proof that something beneath the surface of my marriage had started to rot. The table, the exclusion, and now this money moving in directions I didn't understand to people I didn't know with explanations that didn't quite fit. I couldn't just sit with this. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen the transaction. I couldn't go back to my routine of checking our account every Sunday and pretending everything was fine. I set my wine glass down and picked up my phone with steady hands now. Steady because I'd made a decision. I was going to find out who Fiona Brooks was, and I was going to figure out what my husband had done. The apartment was quiet when I heard his key turn in the lock. I've been sitting in the dark for the past 2 hours watching the city lights flicker through our Capitol Hill living room windows. The rain had started again, that Seattle rain that never really stops, just takes breaks to remind you it's still there. I turned on my phone 3 times to call someone, then turned it off again. Who would I call? What would I even say? I didn't turn on the lights. Trevor appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the hallway glow, his gym bag slung over one shoulder. He froze when he saw me. Not because I was sitting in the dark, that would have just been strange. He froze because he could feel it. The shift. The thing that happens when someone you love stops believing you. When suspicion replaces trust. When the foundation of a marriage starts to crack. Sophia. His voice carried a question mark, the kind people use when they're not sure if they're walking into a conversation or an ambush. I let him fumble for the light switch. Let the soft glow of the lamp wash over us. I needed to see his face clearly for this. I needed to watch what happened when I asked him about the lie I'd discovered. "We need to talk about Fiona Brooks," I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by that. I'd expected to sound angry, but instead I sounded almost clinical. Cold even. Like I was discussing a work problem rather than the unraveling of my marriage. He set his gym bag down slowly. Too slowly. The kind of slowness that suggests someone is buying time. "What about her? Who is she, Trevor?" I asked it simply, like I was asking for a definition, like I genuinely didn't already know he was going to lie to me. He moved toward the couch and I realized he was going to sit down, to settle in. Like this was going to be a casual conversation. The anger flickered, then a quick hot flash of it, but I kept my face composed. I'd learned something in those 2 hours of sitting in the dark. Anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. I needed clarity more. "I told you. She's a business consultant. She's helping my mom with some financial restructuring for the agency." I watched him. Really watched him. His shoulders were tense, pulled up toward his ears like he was bracing for impact. His hands went to his thighs, then moved to rest on his knees, fidgeting. My Trevor, who was supposed to be the calm one, the one who didn't get rattled, he was rattled. His composure was cracking, and he hadn't even answered a real question yet. "And the $30,000. I asked. I kept my voice level controlled. I was learning how to do this, how to sound like I had all the answers when really I was just collecting pieces. His jaw tightened. "I told you about that too. Mom needed—" "You didn't tell me—" I interrupted, not raising my voice. That was the thing about rage I was learning. The most dangerous version of it came out quiet, controlled, like a knife instead of a hammer. "You told me it was a loan. You didn't tell me I had money disappearing from our account to someone I've never heard of. To someone whose name you threw at me like it explained everything, like the fact that her name was Fiona Brooks, somehow justified taking $30,000 without asking me. It does explain everything." "No, it doesn't." I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the chair, because I know what ACH transfers look like. I work in finance-adjacent industries. I know what business consultant expenses look like. I know what legitimate money movements look like. And I know what your mother's business actually needs because she calls me. She talks to me. She calls me to ask how you're doing, Trevor. Your mother confides in me about her struggles with the agency. And you know what? She's never mentioned any restructuring, any financial consultant, any Fiona Brooks. He stood up. That's when I knew for sure. People who are telling the truth don't need to stand up. They don't need the distance or the height advantage or the excuse to look away. They don't need to create physical space between themselves and the person asking for honesty. "I'm not going through an interrogation tonight," he said, and there was an edge to his voice now. Frustration, maybe even anger that I dared to question him. "Then tell me the truth, right now. Who is Fiona Brooks?" I stood too because I needed him to understand that I wasn't backing down, that I wasn't going to accept his deflections and his vague answers and his refusal to meet my eyes. His eyes met mine for just a second, long enough for me to see the calculation happening behind them, the moment of decision, the instant where he chose deception over honesty, then slid away. They fixed on the rain-streaked window behind me on the Seattle skyline, anywhere but my face. That was when I knew, not suspected, knew. She's a consultant. he said again, but the words had changed. They'd gone thin, translucent. The kind of words you use when you're reading a script you didn't write. When you're playing a part you never auditioned for. She's helping my mom. I'm going to ask you one more time. I said, my voice dropping even lower, and I need you to listen to me very carefully. Who is Fiona Brooks? That's her name. That's who she is. He crossed his arms over his chest. A barrier, a defense mechanism, a physical representation of how closed off he'd become. But his eyes still wouldn't meet mine, and that absence of eye contact said everything his words wouldn't. I watched him for a long moment, this man I'd married 4 years ago, because I thought I knew him, because I thought we'd built something solid. We'd put a down payment on this apartment together. We'd signed documents with each other's names. We'd talked about expanding our family. We'd made plans that seemed to stretch into infinity. And now he was lying to me in our living room while the Seattle rain tapped against the windows like a metronome marking time. And he wouldn't even have the decency to look me in the eye while he did it. I want the money back, I said quietly. All of it. Tomorrow. That's not possible. Then in 2 weeks, Sophia, you're going to return that money, Trevor, or I'm going to find out exactly where it went and why. And I'm going to do it with or without your help. Do you understand me? Ye pines. He said nothing. Just stood there, a man who suddenly looked like a stranger wearing a face I used to know, a familiar mask covering someone I'd never actually met. I need to know who she is, I whispered. I need to know why you're lying to me. I told you, he said, and there it was, that micro flash of frustration, of anger, of someone who'd been caught in their lie and couldn't quite remember why they were supposed to keep up the pretense. She's a consultant. I walked past him toward the bedroom. I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't stand in the same room with someone who would stand in front of me in our apartment that we'd bought together in the life we were supposed to be building and lie directly to my face. We'll talk about this tomorrow, I said from the doorway. But I wouldn't talk to him tomorrow. Tomorrow I'd be doing something else entirely. Tomorrow I'd be looking for answers he clearly wasn't going to give me. Tomorrow I'd find out that Fiona Brooks wasn't just a consultant, wasn't just someone who'd received $30,000 from my husband's account. Tomorrow I'd realize that the man I was sleeping next to had a whole other life I didn't know about, that the money wasn't the real issue. That lying about her name, about her purpose, about where the money went, those were the real betrayals. But that night I just closed the bedroom door and listened to him move around the apartment, uncertain now, maybe even afraid of what came next. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and wondered how many other lies were sitting in the spaces between us. How many other secrets was I not asking about? He was lying. I was certain of it. And that certainty, that knowledge that the man I'd married was capable of looking me in the eye and inventing stories, that was the moment everything truly changed. That was the moment I understood that I didn't know my husband at all. The apartment felt too quiet on the 3rd day after we fought. Trevor had taken to sleeping on the couch, or maybe he was going out at night. I'd stopped paying attention to his schedule. Instead, I'd become obsessed with one thing, finding out who Fiona Brooks really was. That obsession had consumed me in a way I didn't recognize. It was like watching someone else control my hands, my thoughts, my entire focus. I sat at my desk in the early morning before work with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. My laptop glowed in the dim Seattle light, filtering through my office window. The rain outside was relentless, the kind that made you feel like you were living inside a cloud. My heart was racing even though I was just about to start typing. I knew on some level that whatever I found was going to change things, that there was no going back from this particular investigation. I typed her name into the search bar, Fiona Brooks. Just like that. 3 billion results, probably, but I started clicking through them anyway. I found several profiles attached to that name. One professional database showed she was 32 years old and listed her occupation as interior designer freelance, not a consultant, not a business analyst, not anyone who would be helping my mother-in-law restructure a marketing agency's finances. My chest tightened immediately. The lie was already confirmed before I'd even started looking. I checked another platform where professionals posted their portfolios and credentials. Her profile was there, polished, professional, meticulously curated. She had thousands of connections according to her public information. The photos were well-chosen design projects, mood boards, a few travel shots from what looked like Cabo and Miami. There was a photo of her at a gallery opening in Seattle dated 8 months ago. No sign of any connection to Patricia. No photos with Trevor's mother. No business-related content whatsoever. Just a woman building a brand as an interior designer. A woman my husband had introduced into our lives under false pretenses. I scrolled through the available public photos, the ones she'd tagged herself in, or that friends had shared. That's where people's guards came down sometimes in photos other people had shared of them. In the candid moments, in the ones they didn't control, that's where the truth lived. And that's where I found it. A photograph from a hotel room. Not just any hotel, it looked like one of those upscale places downtown, the kind with expensive bedding and a view of Puget Sound. The kind of place that costs $300 a night. Fiona was there, yes, but she wasn't alone. She was leaning against someone's chest, both of them smiling at the camera like they didn't have a care in the world. Her hand was on their arm, and their arm was wrapped around her waist in a gesture of complete possession and comfort. The someone was Trevor. The photograph was dated 6 months ago, June. I stared at it for a long time without blinking. My hands had gone numb. My fingers felt like they belonged to someone else. It was like watching someone in a movie when they finally understand the plot twist that moment, where all the pieces fall into place and nothing will ever be the same again. That moment where you realize you've been watching a story about a lie your entire life and everyone else knew it but you. I checked the account that posted the image. A profile I didn't recognize, probably a friend of Fiona's. But as I looked at the details, I saw something else. The timestamp had been edited. Someone had cleaned this up, tried to erase it, but the older version still existed visible in search results, a ghost of what they'd tried to hide. They'd been covering their tracks, both of them. I went back to Fiona's main profile. There, buried in her list of connections, I saw something else, a different account, one I recognized instantly. Trevor's old college account that I didn't even know he still used, an account he'd apparently kept secret from me. And he was following Fiona's profile from this account, viewing her content, liking her posts. Very recent activity from 2 days ago, while he was lying on our couch claiming everything was fine, while he was pretending to sleep. My hands were trembling now. Actual trembling, the kind that made it hard to hold the mouse. The kind that makes you understand your body is having a reaction your mind hasn't fully processed yet. I took a screenshot of everything. The hotel photograph, the timeline, the different account, the connections, the likes, the follows, all of it. Everything that spelled out one undeniable truth. This wasn't about my mother-in-law's business. This wasn't about a consultant who needed $30,000. This was about my husband having an affair. This was about lies stacked on top of lies. This was about a man who would look me in the eye and tell me stories that had no basis in reality, while all the evidence of his infidelity sat in plain sight on the internet, waiting for me to find it. I held my phone to capture more screenshots, my hands so unsteady that the images came out slightly blurred. But it didn't matter. The evidence was there. It was stark and irrefutable and utterly devastating. I could show these to him. I could throw them in his face. But even as I thought it, I knew it wouldn't matter. He'd already proved he was capable of lying. What would stop him from lying about this? One photograph, that's all it took. One photograph from a hotel room taken 6 months ago with my husband's arm around another woman to make me understand that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. Everything I'd built my life on was constructed on a foundation of deception. I sat there at my desk for I don't know how long. 5 minutes. An hour. Time seemed to have stopped working properly. The cold coffee got colder. The rain kept falling against the window. The Seattle morning continued around me like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. And I realized something that made my stomach turn. Trevor had been lying to me for months, not just since we fought, not just about Fiona, but for months, since before June. Since before he took that photograph in that hotel room, he'd been building this second life while I was building a life with him, while I was thinking about our future, while I was planning what we might become. The $30,000 wasn't about saving his mother's business. It was about keeping his girlfriend comfortable. It was about paying for hotel rooms and trips and whatever else a man gives to the woman he's sleeping with when he's supposed to be building a life with someone else. It was about compartmentalizing, separating me, the wife, the practical one, the one who paid bills and went to work from her, the woman he wanted, the woman he was actually choosing. I looked at that photograph one more time, at Fiona's smile, at how comfortable she looked in my husband's arms, at how natural they looked together, and I made a decision. He wanted to lie to me. He could keep lying. But I was done accepting his version of the truth. I was done being the only one who didn't know what was happening in my own marriage. I was going to find out everything, every lie, every transaction, every moment he'd betrayed me, every instance where he'd chosen her over our marriage. I was going to build a case. I was going to document everything. And then I was going to decide what came next. Starting now, I called him with a voice I didn't recognize as my own. It was early, not even 8 in the morning. Trevor was probably still at the office. Or maybe he wasn't at the office. Maybe he was somewhere else entirely. Maybe I didn't know where my husband was anymore, and that thought alone made my stomach turn. The realization that I'd lost track of him, that he'd become someone I couldn't account for. He picked up on the 4th ring. Sophia. His voice was cautious. He knew something was wrong. He could hear it in the way I'd said his name, the flatness, the absence of the warmth that usually lived there. "We need to talk," I said. "Right now." There was a pause. I could hear the ambient noise of wherever he was, keyboards clicking, distant voices, the hum of an office building. An office then, or at least a place that sounded like one. A place where he was pretending everything was normal. "What's wrong?" His voice had shifted. Not yet defensive, but close. The way someone sounds when they're bracing for impact. Like they can feel the ground shifting beneath them. "I found a picture of you and Fiona," I said. No preamble. No softening the blow. No mercy. "At a hotel. You were holding each other. Very close." The silence that followed was different from the pause. This was the silence of someone caught, of someone whose mind was racing through all the ways this conversation could go, all the excuses they might offer, all the lies they might construct to explain the unexplainable. "Sophia," he started. "Don't," I said. "Just tell me. Who is she to you?" And then he said it. The thing that broke something inside me that I didn't even know was holding together. "I love her." I felt my grip on the phone loosen slightly. My hand went numb. "You what?" "I love her," he repeated quieter this time, like he was saying something he'd been holding inside for so long that now it was finally out, and he almost sounded relieved. Like confession was a weight being lifted. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, but I love her, Sophia." "You love her." I repeated the words, tasting foreign in my mouth. "Impossible. You're having an affair, Trevor. Do you understand that you're having an affair with another woman, and you're telling me you love her?" "I don't know what you want me to say," he said, and now his voice was starting to take on that edge, the edge that comes right before anger, right before blame. I don't know what I'm even saying anymore. I'm confused about everything. Confused. I heard the laugh come out of me, but there was no humor in it. Just disbelief. Just the sound of someone watching her world collapse. "You're not confused. You lied to me. You took money from me, more than $30,000 that I know of. You created fake reasons to justify it. You told me about a consultant who doesn't exist. And now you're telling me you're in love with another woman." "It's not like that," he said. "Then what's it like, Trevor?" "Because from where I'm sitting, looking at photographs of you holding another woman in a hotel room, it looks exactly like that." "You don't understand." His voice was shifting again, getting harder, getting colder, getting cruel. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. My mother's business is falling apart. Fiona's been helping me figure things out. She listens to me in ways that you never have. Stop, I said. Don't you dare blame this on me. Don't you dare suggest that this is something I caused by not listening well enough or not being supportive enough. I'm not saying, how much money, Trevor? I interrupted. I needed numbers, facts, something concrete I could hold on to. What? How much money total? Not 30,000. How much have you actually taken? There was another pause, a longer one this time. The pause of someone calculating how much they could admit to without making things worse. 45, he said quietly. $45,000. More than I'd even realized. More than the initial transfer. He'd been bleeding our account dry piece by piece, withdrawal by withdrawal, and I'd been so busy, so distracted, so completely oblivious that I hadn't even noticed. I'd trusted him. I'd believed him. I'd let him take money from our shared life to fund his secret one. 45,000, I repeated numbly. The number hung between us like a physical thing. Sophia, listen. But then he said something that changed everything. And don't talk to my mother about this, he said suddenly. His voice had changed completely. All the defensiveness, all the pleading, all the false vulnerability, it was gone. What replaced it was something harder, something that made the hair on my arms stand up, something dangerous. The tone of his voice had shifted into something I'd never heard from him before, something that sounded almost threatening. What, Mo? I said. I mean it, Sophia. Do not tell my mother about this. Do not go to her with stories about Fiona or any of this. It will destroy her. And if you say something to her, if you go running to my family with this, there will be consequences. Consequences. I heard my voice get higher, smaller. Are you threatening me? I'm asking you not to do something that will hurt my family, he said, but his words felt weighted, deliberate, calculated, like he'd thought about this, like he'd prepared for this moment. Like he knew exactly how those words would land and what they would do to me. I opened my mouth to respond, but something stopped me. It was the realization that I was on the phone with a stranger. The man on the other end of this line, the one who was issuing veiled threats and talking about consequences, this wasn't the Trevor I'd married. The Trevor I knew was empathetic. He was sensitive. He apologized too easily. He couldn't hurt a fly. This Trevor, the one on the phone, he was someone else entirely, someone I'd never actually met. I have to go, I said quietly. Sophia, I didn't mean... I hung up before he could finish his sentence. I sat in my car in the parking garage at Amazon, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The morning light was just starting to filter through the concrete pillars, casting long shadows across empty spaces. I could hear the occasional car engine echoing in the cavernous garage, but otherwise, I was alone. And that's when it truly hit me, I was alone in this. Whatever came next, I was going to have to face it alone. His voice had changed during that call. The cadence, the tone, the words, everything had shifted. It was like watching someone transform in real time. The man I'd promised my life to was disappearing, being replaced by someone harder, someone capable of things I didn't want to imagine, someone who could threaten consequences if I told his family the truth. I suddenly understood that this wasn't going to end with a conversation. This was going to end with lawyers. I started checking each transaction one by one. It was late evening when I pulled up the bank portal on my laptop, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea that had gone cold beside me hours ago. The apartment was quiet in that particular way that only happens when you're completely alone. Trevor hadn't come home since our call that morning. I'd gotten a text around 6 o'clock saying he was working late, which I now understood was code for something else entirely. It didn't matter where he was. What mattered was that I finally had the silence I needed to think clearly, to see clearly. The first transfer to Fiona Brooks was dated June 15th, $30,000. That was the one I'd already found, the one that had started this entire investigation. But as I scrolled further back through our transaction history, my stomach started to tighten. The dates stretched backward. The amounts varied, but they were all there. There were more transfers. $2,000 on June 18th, $3,000 on June 25th, $5,000 on July 3rd, another $3,000 in early August, $2,500 in late August. Small amounts, the kind that might slip past someone who wasn't looking closely. But I was looking closely now. I was looking at every single transaction like it was evidence in a trial. Like my marriage depended on understanding the exact mechanics of how my husband had been stealing from me. I opened my calculator app and started adding them up methodically. The smaller transfers totaled an additional $15,000 beyond the initial $30,000 transfer. So it wasn't just one massive betrayal. Over the course of 6 months, Trevor had systematically moved $45,000 to Fiona Brooks's account. $45,000 that belonged partially to me. $45,000 that we'd earned together, saved together, accumulated during our marriage. $45,000. My hands went cold just typing the number into the calculator. The digits seemed to mock me. 4, 5, 3 zeros. Such simple numbers that somehow added up to the complete destruction of everything I thought I understood about my marriage. I searched my email for anything from Patricia Trevor's mother. There were dozens of messages going back months, but one in particular caught my attention. It was from 3 weeks ago, sent on a Wednesday afternoon. "Help Mom out, son. Everything will be okay once we get through this rough patch. I'm counting on you." The emotional manipulation was elegant, really, if I was being honest with myself. A mother asking her son for help, a mother expressing trust and reliance, a mother making it sound like she needed him desperately. And Trevor had used that email, that exact emotional hook, to justify taking money, to justify giving it to Fiona. I searched through my access to Trevor's backup email files. It took me 20 minutes to find it buried in the spam folder like he'd tried to hide it. And there, dated 2 days after Patricia's message, was a response from Fiona. I shouldn't have had access to it. I don't even know how I found it in the backup files, but there it was, preserved in the cloud like a ghost of their conversation. "Thank you for the money, baby. I love you." Baby, she called him baby. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not anger, worse than anger, clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally understand that everything you've been told is a lie, that the entire foundation of your understanding was constructed on deception. It wasn't about helping his mother. The email from Patricia was manipulation, emotional leverage. "Help me" had been code for "give Fiona money." Patricia's desperation was real, probably, but Trevor had weaponized it. He'd used his mother's struggles as justification for funding his affair. And Fiona's message proved it. She wasn't thanking him for helping save his mother's business. She was thanking him for the money itself, for the literal, tangible cash he'd been giving her. But that was just the beginning. I dug deeper into the bank records, searching for any account activity I didn't recognize, any transfers that didn't make sense, any patterns that suggested something more sinister than simple infidelity. And that's when I found it. An account opened 5 months ago under Trevor's name alone. No joint ownership, just him. A secret account he'd created without telling me. I clicked through to the statement with trembling hands. The account had received regular deposits, large ones. $50,000 had been funneled into that account over 6 months in increments that matched almost perfectly with the transfers to Fiona. Sometimes a few days after, sometimes a few days before, but the pattern was unmistakable. It was like watching someone walk their fingertips across a map, tracing a route they'd planned long in advance. Like watching evidence of premeditation laid out in black and white. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't something that had just happened because he'd fallen in love with someone and made a momentary mistake. This was premeditated. This was calculated. This was a man who deliberately opened a secret account, deliberately routed money through it, and deliberately given funds to Fiona in a way that tried to obscure where the money was actually coming from. He'd built an entire financial infrastructure to hide his affair. I sat back on the couch, my laptop balanced on my knees, and I felt something shift inside me fundamentally. The shock from the phone call this morning had worn off. The anger that had fueled my investigation was still there, but now it was different. It was colder, more focused, more dangerous. This was what they meant in the movies when they talked about someone's eyes opening. All the small moments that had seemed innocent or explainable suddenly made sense through this new lens. The nights he said he was helping his mother, but came home late with explanations that didn't quite add up. The excuses about needing to help Fiona with design projects that were apparently urgent enough to require thousands of dollars. The way he'd gotten nervous when I mentioned checking our account balance. The way he'd suddenly become protective of his phone. It was all connected. Every lie, every excuse, every transfer, every secret account, every moment of manipulation. My husband hadn't just been unfaithful, he hadn't just been lying to me. He'd been systematically extracting money from our life together and routing it to his girlfriend while trying to make it look like he was helping his family. He'd done it carefully. He'd covered his tracks. He'd built this entire financial structure piece by piece over 6 months like an architect designing a fraud. $95,000. That's what I calculated by the time I was done. $45,000 directly to Fiona in identifiable transfers, plus the $50,000 that had been sitting in his secret account. $95,000 that should have been securing our future. $95,000 that should have been paying down our mortgage, investing in our retirement building, the life we'd promised each other on the day we got married. Instead, it was buying hotel rooms and trips to Cabo and the sustained attention of a woman he'd promised me he barely knew. I looked at the time on my laptop, 11:47 at night. The apartment was dark except for the glow of the screen. I thought about calling him again. I thought about confronting him with what I'd found. I thought about throwing these numbers in his face and watching him try to explain them away. But I knew that wouldn't work. He'd find a way to minimize it. He'd find a way to explain it. He'd find a way to manipulate it. He'd find a way to make me doubt what I was seeing right in front of me in black and white numbers. What I needed wasn't another conversation. What I needed wasn't another opportunity for him to lie. What I needed was someone who dealt in facts and evidence. Someone whose job was to understand exactly what it meant when someone systematically transferred $95,000 to fund an affair. Someone who could translate this financial betrayal into legal language. What I needed was a lawyer, and I knew exactly who to call. I called Melissa on my way into the office the next morning. She picked up after the first ring, which meant she'd probably seen my name flash across her screen and already knew something was wrong. Melissa had that sixth sense, the kind of friend who could detect crisis in the tone of a voice before you'd even opened your mouth. "Hey," she said cautiously. "You okay?" "No," I said. "I need to talk to you. Can you meet me for coffee before work?" 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a booth at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, the kind of place where they knew our orders, because we'd been coming for 3 years. I ordered chamomile tea instead of my usual latte. My stomach couldn't handle caffeine. It couldn't handle much of anything at that moment. I told her everything. The affair, the money, the photographs, the secret account, the emails from Patricia, the messages from Fiona, all $95,000. I laid it all out like cards on a table, and I watched her face shift from confusion to shock, to a quiet, controlled rage that I recognized because I'd felt it myself. Melissa didn't interrupt me. She just listened, her coffee growing cold in front of her, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finally finished, when I'd told her about the hidden account, the systematic transfers, the way Trevor had calculated every move, she was silent for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. "You need a lawyer," she said finally. "Right now." "I know," I said. "No, I mean today, not tomorrow, today. This is serious, Sophia, like really serious." She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. "I know someone, James Mitchell. He's handled some cases for people at my firm. He's good, really good. And more importantly, he won't judge you. He'll just help you." "Do you think he can take my case?" I asked. "I think he'd be crazy not to," Melissa said. She made a phone call right there in the coffee shop, explained the situation in brief terms to someone on the other end, and within 10 minutes had arranged an appointment for that very afternoon. When she hung up, she looked at me with an expression that was both fierce and protective. "You're going to get through this," she said, "and you're not going to do it alone." By 2 o'clock that afternoon, I was sitting in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a downtown Seattle office building, looking out over the Puget Sound while a man in his mid-50s reviewed the screenshots I'd printed out and organized into folders. James Mitchell had gray at the temples and the kind of calm demeanor that made you believe he'd seen everything, and probably had. He wore a navy suit without a tie, and his reading glasses hung from a chain around his neck. He didn't say anything for several minutes. He just looked through each piece of evidence, making small notes on a legal pad. The rain that had been constant all morning was now pelting the floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a moment the sound was the only thing between us. I found myself listening to it instead of thinking about what he might be discovering in those pages. Finally, he looked up and set down his pen carefully. "This isn't just infidelity," he said, his voice measured and quiet. "This is fraud. He systematically transferred funds from an account that should legally belong to both of you. This is misuse of marital assets. This is a breach of fiduciary duty within the marriage." The words felt heavy, formal, legal in a way that made everything suddenly very real and very serious. "What does that mean?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "It means we have options, strong options." He leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "First, I need to see absolutely everything. All bank statements going back 2 years, emails, text messages, any photographs or evidence you have, everything. We're going to build a comprehensive picture of what happened and when." I slid the folder across his desk. Everything I'd gathered over the past few days was inside it. "Second," he continued, "we need to act fast. Today, if possible. This is important. We're going to contact your bank and freeze the joint account. Not permanently, this will require his authorization eventually, but we need to secure what's left. We also need to change all passwords. Any account that's in your name alone needs new access codes immediately." "Can we do that?" I asked. "Is that legal?" "You're the account holder," James said firmly. "Yes, it's absolutely legal and necessary. If he's hidden one account, he might be hiding others. We need to protect your financial interests." He walked me through the steps. I took notes on my phone, my hands steady, even though my insides were trembling. We called the bank together. I spoke to a representative in my own voice, which felt surreal, claiming control of accounts that I'd shared with someone I loved, essentially locking him out of our money. It took 15 minutes to freeze the joint account and set up a hold that would require both signatures to access or transfer funds. When it was done, I felt like I'd just crossed some invisible line. There was no going back from this. This wasn't a conversation anymore. This was action. This was real. "Now," James said as we wrapped up, "we prepare. We document everything. We build an ironclad case. And we prepare you for the fact that this is going to get complicated." I drove home with the rain still coming down, and I thought about what he'd said. Complicated. That was one word for it. I could think of others. For the first time since I'd discovered the affair, since I'd found the photographs and the secret accounts and all the evidence of his systematic betrayal, I didn't feel completely alone. Melissa had my back. James had my back. There was a plan now. There was direction. But as I pulled into the parking garage of our apartment building, the apartment we'd bought together, the life we were supposed to build, I realized something else, too. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered. And I had a feeling there was much more to find. James had said he needed everything going back 2 years. 2 years. What else had Trevor been hiding in that time? How many other secrets were waiting for me to discover them? I sat in my car for a moment before going inside, watching the rain streak down the windshield, and I understood that this was only the beginning. The real fight was about to start. I called her directly. It was late in the evening, around 9 o'clock, and I was sitting in my car in the parking garage of our apartment building. The engine was off. The rain had stopped for once, leaving that peculiar Seattle silence, where the only sound was the occasional drip from the concrete above. I'd scrolled through the messages James had sent me, found Fiona's number in one of the screenshots, and before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed. I didn't expect her to answer, but she did. "Hello." Her voice was cautious, like she was answering a call from a number she didn't recognize which she was. "This is Sophia," I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by that. "Trevor's wife." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "I know you've been seeing my husband," I continued. "I know he transferred $45,000 to you. I want to know why. Sophia the first. Why Fiona? Another pause. Longer this time. And then she said something that made my entire body go cold. You don't know about the baby. The words didn't make sense at first. They were English words strung together in an English sentence, but they might as well have been in another language. The baby. What baby? What was she talking about? What I said. I'm pregnant, Fiona said quietly. I'm carrying Trevor's baby. I'm 4 months along, the money. I needed it for the baby. For medical bills and ultrasounds and everything else that comes with being pregnant. I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't breathe. It was like all the air had been sucked out of the garage, out of the car, out of my lungs. My hands, which had been so steady just moments before, were now trembling. I gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought I might break it. No, I said. No, you're lying. I'm not lying, Fiona said, and her voice had changed. It sounded younger somehow, frightened. I know this is horrible. I know I've hurt you. But it happened, and now there's going to be a baby. There's really going to be a baby. How far along? My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Hollow, like it was coming from someone else. 4 months, she said. Maybe closer to 5 now. The baby's due in early December. I've already had 2 ultrasounds. I heard the heartbeat. It's real, Sophia. It's all very real. December, 5 months away. I did the math in my head. June. They'd been together since June. Maybe before that. How long had this been going on? How long had my husband been seeing this woman while planning their future together? Planning for their baby? While I was at home believing that we still had a future, too. I didn't want it to happen this way, Fiona said. Her words tumbled out quickly like she was trying to explain something she knew was inexplicable. I didn't want to hurt you, but Trevor said He said you have plenty of money. You have your career at Amazon. You'll be okay. You're strong and you have everything figured out and you'll be fine. Something inside me snapped. Not violently. It wasn't rage exactly, though rage was definitely there too. It was a cold, clear understanding that this woman, whoever she was, didn't know me at all. She didn't know what it meant to have the life you thought you'd built crumble in real time. She didn't understand that money doesn't matter when your marriage is imploding. She didn't understand that being strong doesn't mean you don't break. It doesn't mean you don't shatter into 1,000 pieces that you'll spend years trying to glue back together. You don't know anything about me, I said quietly. The calmness in my voice scared me. You don't know anything about what this means. I know, and I'm sorry. I hung up. I just ended the call. I didn't wait for her apology. I didn't listen to whatever else she thought she needed to say. I simply pressed the button and severed the connection as if cutting off the phone call could cut off the reality of what she'd just told me. But of course it couldn't. I sat in the darkness of that parking garage, my hands still gripping the steering wheel, my eyes staring out at nothing. Through the windshield, I could see the concrete pillars holding up the structure, the fluorescent lights casting everything in an ugly yellow glow. This was where I'd bought groceries on the way home. This was where I'd sat when I was tired after work and needed 5 minutes of silence before going upstairs to the life I thought I had. My husband wasn't just having an affair. My husband wasn't just stealing from me. My husband wasn't just lying to my face and breaking our vows and destroying everything we'd built together. In 5 months, there was going to be a baby, a real living, breathing baby, another woman's baby, Trevor's baby. And that baby would exist in the world as a permanent reminder that he'd chosen someone else. He'd built a family with someone else. He'd betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. I thought about all the conversations we'd had about children. Trevor had always said he wanted to wait a few more years. He'd said we should travel, first establish ourselves more firmly in our careers, buy a bigger house. He'd said there was no rush. And all along, he'd been creating a family with someone else. I started the car. I didn't have anywhere to go. I just needed to move. I needed to do something other than sit with this knowledge, this impossible, terrible knowledge. I drove through the Seattle streets without paying attention to where I was going. The rain started up again, the way it does in this city, not dramatically, but inevitably, like it had never really stopped at all. My marriage wasn't just over. It had been replaced by something else entirely, something with a heartbeat and a due date in December, something that was growing inside another woman's body, something that would be born into a world where my husband had already chosen it over me. I pulled over on a quiet street in Capitol Hill and let myself cry. Not the controlled, measured tears I'd shed before. This was different. This was the kind of crying that comes from a place so deep inside you that you didn't know it existed, the kind that makes you gasp for breath between sobs. And when it was over, when I was empty and exhausted and completely hollow, I called James Mitchell. The coffee at James Mitchell's office was terrible, but I drank it anyway because I needed something to do with my hands. My palms were sweating. My heart was racing. I needed the ceramic mug to give my nervous energy somewhere to go. James was a lawyer, a man in his 50s with gray temples and the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of handling complex financial cases and messy divorces. Sarah Chen sat beside him, a forensic accountant with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. She'd been reviewing Trevor's accounts for 2 weeks, meticulously tracing every transfer, every withdrawal, every hidden transaction. Today was the day they were going to tell me what they'd found, what he was going to confirm, what was going to change everything. Your husband has been systematically moving money out of your joint accounts. James began spreading documents across his desk with methodical precision. His movements were careful, deliberate, like he was handling evidence in a courtroom. Not all at once, small withdrawals over months, enough that it wouldn't trigger immediate red flags, but strategic enough that it adds up to significant sums. I nodded, trying to absorb the details, but my mind was stuck on the phrase systematically. That word implied planning, intention, calculation. This wasn't an accident or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was deliberate. This was someone who'd thought about what they were doing, someone who'd planned it carefully. Where did the money go? I asked, my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking. I gripped the coffee mug tighter, feeling the warmth seep into my cold fingers. "That's where it gets interesting," Sarah said. She pulled out a series of bank statements and laid them out like a map of betrayal. Each document was a breadcrumb, leading deeper into a mystery I wasn't prepared to solve. Most of it went to what appears to be a lending operation, not a traditional bank, something more informal, something that operates outside legal channels, a loan shark. The words felt foreign on my tongue, like I was speaking a language I'd never learned, like I was reading lines from a script that didn't belong in my life. "Essentially, yes," Sarah continued, nodding slowly. "But this isn't a one-man operation. This is organized. Multiple accounts, multiple intermediaries, money flowing through different channels and shell companies. The structure is sophisticated enough that it would take months to untangle if we weren't looking for it specifically. Someone designed this very carefully." She pulled out a complex diagram showing interconnected boxes and arrows, shell companies in different states, transfers crossing state lines, money moving in circles becoming increasingly difficult to track. I thought about Fiona, about the baby, about Trevor's mother and her supposed debt to dangerous people, about all the lies stacking on top of each other like layers in a cake. So Trevor was borrowing from these people. "No," James said firmly, shaking his head with absolute certainty. Trevor was working with these people. He wasn't a client seeking loans. He was a partner in the operation. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. A partner in what exactly? "Money laundering, primarily," Sarah said. She pointed to the diagram with a pen tracing the flow of money from account to account. "Your husband would help move money through legitimate-looking channels. He'd create false invoices, falsified documents, fraudulent receipts. The lending operation would provide him with cash that he could claim came from his family or his business. In exchange, they use his accounts to make their operation look legitimate. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement for them. For you, it's devastating." I thought about all the times I'd questioned where money was coming from, and Trevor had given me answers that seemed plausible at the time. His mother needed help with medical bills. His business had taken on new clients. A bonus had come through from work, a settlement from an old lawsuit. Every answer had a layer of truth thick enough to cover the lie beneath it. He'd been consistent with his deceptions. He'd built a narrative that made sense if you didn't look too closely. What happens now? I asked, though. I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever came next. James set down his pen carefully and looked at me directly. His expression was serious but not unkind. Now we have evidence of your husband's involvement in financial fraud. But here's something important you need to understand. He paused, choosing his words with precision and gravity. This lending organization, the files on this group, have been in the federal government's crosshairs for months. They've been under active surveillance by white-collar crime units. The documentation you've provided, combined with the money trails we can trace, will be the missing piece. The evidence that links your husband directly to their operation. My heart accelerated. The implications were starting to sink in. What does that mean for me? It means, James said carefully, that when we bring this to law enforcement, it won't just stay local. This crosses state lines. It involves organized lending operations and money laundering on a federal scale. The case will go to the FBI. The files about this organization have already caught the attention of federal authorities. I felt the weight settle on me like a physical thing, like something pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The FBI, are you serious? The FBI, he confirmed with absolute certainty. This is beyond just your marriage now, Sophia. Your husband isn't simply committing fraud against you. He's part of a larger criminal network that has been operating for years. The evidence you've gathered, the bank statements, the emails, the pattern of withdrawals, the communications with Fiona, it's going to help law enforcement take down the entire operation. James leaned forward, his expression serious but not unkind. He was treating me like I was capable of handling this information, like I was strong enough. I know this is overwhelming. I know you came here thinking this was just about your divorce, just about infidelity and betrayal. But you need to understand something. You're not just protecting yourself anymore. You're potentially helping the government build a case against people who've been victimizing others like you for years. You're helping to stop them. I sat there processing everything. My coffee had gone cold long ago. The office suddenly felt too small, too warm, too enclosed. This wasn't just about Trevor anymore. This was about something much larger, much darker. This was about organized crime federal investigations, things that existed in news documentaries, not in my life, not in my marriage. When do we go to the police? I asked. Soon, James said. But first we need to make sure every detail is airtight. The FBI doesn't move on cases like this without absolute certainty. We're going to compile everything, every transaction, every communication, every connection we can trace between your husband and the lending operation. And then we're going to hand it over to Detective Emma. I left that office that afternoon with a folder containing evidence of my husband's betrayal and his crimes. But I also left with something else, the knowledge that this wasn't just about me anymore. That somewhere in a federal building, people were already watching, already waiting, already preparing to move. I called Sarah that evening from my car, sitting in the parking garage, watching the rain streak across my windshield. I'm ready, I told her. I'm ready to go to the police. Good, Sarah said. Her voice was calm, professional, reassuring. Because Detective Emma is expecting your call tomorrow morning. Sarah's office smelled like leather and old books, the kind of office that inspired both confidence and dread simultaneously. She spread the documents across her desk with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times before. Her movements were practiced, efficient, clinical. This was routine for her. Just another marriage falling apart. For me, it was the unraveling of everything. These are the withdrawals, she said, pointing to highlighted transactions spanning 18 months. Yellow markers illuminated the most damaging ones. But here's what's important. The $45,000 you discovered was just the beginning. When I traced back further 2 years instead of 6 months, the total reached something much larger. I felt my chest tighten. How much larger? $180,000, Sarah said quietly. I couldn't speak. $180,000. That was more than most people earned in a year. That was my life, essentially withdrawn piece by piece and given to his girlfriend and his mother and his criminal enterprise. The $45,000 you found earlier was just the tip of the iceberg, Sarah continued. The secret account goes back further than you realized. Your husband had been building this infrastructure for much longer than the recent transfers to Fiona. He's been doing this systematically for years. I stared at the numbers, trying to comprehend them, trying to understand how someone could move that much money without me noticing. All of them withdrawn in cash, Sarah said. All of them untraceable. $180,000. The number was so large it became abstract betrayal quantified. Trust destroyed in precise increments. What was the money for? I asked. That's the interesting part, Sarah said. She pulled out 2 separate files. According to Trevor's emails and text messages, he told his mother he was taking money out because she had debt with loan sharks. He needed cash to pay them off before something happened to her. He was the dutiful son, the protector. My stomach twisted. Trevor's mother had never mentioned owing money to anyone dangerous. But I'd learned by now that there were entire conversations happening in Trevor's life that I knew nothing about. Sarah continued, her voice steady and professional. But he told Fiona something different. He told her he was setting aside money for her and the baby. He called it a nest egg. He positioned himself as the provider, the man who would take care of her and his child. I sat there processing. 2 different stories. 2 different women. 2 different lies, each one crafted for its specific audience. And then something shifted inside me. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was clarity. I sat in Sarah's office staring at the spreadsheet, and suddenly everything crystallized. Trevor hadn't just betrayed me once, he'd orchestrated an entire system of lies with surgical precision. He told my mother-in-law he was saving her from loan sharks, which explained why he needed to withdraw so much cash. He told Fiona he was supporting her pregnancy, which justified the separate payments. But the truth was far darker and far simpler. He was leveraging their vulnerabilities to legitimize his theft from me. He'd positioned himself as the savior. In his mother's eyes, he was the dutiful son risking everything to